here we have what we found is now more than 5,500 people every year going to police reporting sexual assault, and their cases are just being dismissed as unfounded. They're not being counted. And I think that was kind of the springboard for this whole investigation. I started this in the summer of 2015. At the time, we were talking a lot about the Jian Ghomeshi trial and the problems with how the judicial system handles sexual assault cases. And I read a study from an Ottawa professor who looked at this thing called unfounded rates. And I'd never heard of this before, and I used to be a police reporter. And what it is when police do an investigation, when they go to close the case, they give it a code to signify what happened in that case. One of those codes is unfounded, which means we don't think this crime occurred. Everyone who works in this world says, you know what, let's call unfounded for what it is. It's police not believing sexual assault complainants. I was like, how is it that I've never heard about this before? And I started looking into it. I phoned Statistics Canada to ask for their unfounded numbers. They came back and said, actually, we've stopped releasing these. So then I started calling police services to ask if they could give me their unfounded stats, and was told, no, these are not something that we publicly release. So it slowly kind of came to dawn on us that we were going to have to file individual freedom of information requests with every police service.
There's no real sort of standard length of time we work on stories. Some stories are turned around in a day or a week or a month, and others are 6 months to a year, and this one is definitely up there though.
When the numbers started rolling in, some communities had unfounded rates that were 40, 50, 60%. So think about that. 6 out of 10 people going into a police service reporting sexual assault are having their cases dismissed as unfounded. They are dropping out of the system.
And the first round back was really interesting. It was obvious that there was a story here.
And so I sat down with my editors and we kind of went through what we had.
I think probably much to Robyn's chagrin, we thought, what if we were able to do this for the entire country? Ultimately, it would be much more credible. And it was something that had never really been done.
And I was like, okay. That was a full month of work on its own, trying to figure out how do you get in touch with every Canadian police service? Because some police services, OPP, SQ in Quebec, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, RCMP, OPP, they have multiple jurisdictions. So went back to StatsCan, got a list from them, and learned about this thing called police respondent populations, which is basically the country is divided up into police jurisdictions. And so within that, there are about 180 police services in charge of those. So I went about the painstaking process of divvying up which jurisdictions went with which force, and then started mailing FOIs.
What's very important when we do investigative journalism is that we satisfy a small number of principles. We're utterly relentless in the pursuit of our inquiry. We resource it appropriately. We have a neutral line of inquiry, and we always recognize at all times we may be wrong with our thesis. We didn't enter this unfounded investigation with any preconceived notions. We wanted to ensure that both victims and the police had their story told.
I remember telling him that he was hurting me and to stop.
In the end, I spoke to 54 people about their experience reporting sexual assault to police. In most cases, we were able to get documentation related to that complaint, or medical records, court documents, interviews with some of the witnesses, their family members, the officers involved. And what their stories really did is fill in a lot of that detail about what actually happens in a police investigation of sexual assault. And I think coupled with the unfounded statistics really paints a very clear picture that something is wrong.
I would hope that there is cultural change due to this journalism, that women's voices are heard, that the perhaps invisible ripple effects that we do see from time to time, but largely we'll be unaware of, where people discuss it more openly and where women feel that they are going to be treated in a very positive way, as opposed to rolling the dice and maybe even deciding, I don't want to go to the police. We already know that from a lot of other statistics, that people don't want to go to the police. But maybe that can change.
David was very clear in the beginning that he wanted this to be something that all Canadians had. And a lot of what we do right now is we look at big investigations that we invest a tremendous amount of time and effort and also resources and money into, and decide whether or not this is something that is of greater value for our subscribers, or is this of greater value for our audience at large, Canadians at large. And very much in the beginning as well, David indicated that this is something he wanted all audiences to have. So it really is to open up a voice to give people who were never able to speak about this, to begin to speak about it, to be influenced by the fact that there are other people speaking about it. And I think at the end of the day, what you want is Canadians not to be afraid of this subject matter.
I think the series will raise some really important questions about the system that we have in place right now. And there are some really easy fixes, I think, things that can be done right off the bat that would make big change. One, StatsCan should release unfounded statistics. This is something that researchers, academics, criminologists, legal scholars across the country that I spoke to said should absolutely happen immediately. The data is going to be messy and flawed because police services aren't using the code correctly, or they aren't always documenting unfounded cases, but by simply ignoring that problem, it's not going to get any better. Number two, there is no standardized protocol across the country for how sexual assault cases are handled. No province mandates that there is specialized training for sexual assault. So police officers who are investigating this very complex, sensitive, unique crime are likely not to have had any specialized training outside of what they learned in basic police school. This is not the case with domestic violence in some provinces where it's mandated that they have this training. And then finally, I think oversight needs to happen. That is the other big thing. In Canada, so much of this is done behind complete closed doors. And that is not the way it is everywhere else in the world. And I think that would make a huge difference.